Okay, well, so let's get started and talk a little bit about cybersecurity for the have-nots. There's a required disclaimer slide. That's awesome. So I think this means, actually I didn't read it. So let's talk about the agenda though, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by haves and have-nots. I want to also offer you some best practices for have-nots and then talk about a low-budget security stack. And by low budget, I mean something that with the right talent in-house, right? Because nothing is free, right? Your time always costs something, right? But with the right talent in-house, right, or with the right talent that you can acquire, that literally anybody can deploy, right? One of the reasons that that I started giving this talk, and I'll come back around to this in a minute, I do a lot of work in the consultancy space, and I regularly work with clients, all the way up to the Fortune 1, right, all the way down to small, medium enterprises, right? So a couple hundred to a couple thousand employees. And I hear that a lot of consultants are coming in and talking to them and offering them solutions that honestly, right, are barely appropriate for some of the folks in the deep end of the Fortune 500, right? And they're saying, hey, go deploy these. That's horrific advice, right? And so I want to talk a little about what we mean by, again, some of the have-nots, and then talk about best practices and come all the way back around here. So actually, this changed. I'm the VP of Research and Development now at Hunter Strategy. Defense industrial base contracting company, although we do some work in the commercial space as well. I do some interesting security research on the side, IONS faculty, former SANS instructor, and all that other stuff, right? So let's talk about the have-nots and haves and all that. Look, I want to talk quickly about the fact about who this is and who this isn't for, right? If you have literally money falling out of your pockets, right, with your budget. Anybody? That's security? No? Okay. Okay. But if that happened to be you, right, this is not for you. If you have 100 FTEs, right, that work for you, this talk is also not for you, right? If you have tons of, again, just, if you don't have any headcount, also this talk is not for you, right, because the stuff we're going to talk about is going to require headcount no matter what to implement. There is no way around that, right? So CISOs in the room here, who keep getting budget for tools but not for headcount, I'm here to tell you, right, that is a fool's errand. You need headcount. It's not to say you don't need tools. You definitely need those too, right? So now, if you happen to be a security architect at a Fortune 500 or particularly further down the Fortune 500, this talk is absolutely not for you, right? You can get up and leave now. You will probably not learn anything new today, right? There are other fine talks going on elsewhere at RSA. When we start talking about the haves and have-nots, we have to step back and ask, what is achievable given our resources? In my work at IONS, IONS is the Institute for Applied Network Security. We're a decision support company. In my work at IONS, I regularly tell people that my job in security, and your job too, is to solve for X. X on the left side of the equation, right, basically involves the maximum security that I can achieve around a particular goal, right? Sometimes it's just maximum security overall when we're talking about our security program. On the right side of that equation are all our constraints. That's our head count. That's our budget shortfalls. That's the tools that last CISO, damn them, right, installed, right? And now you're stuck in some 5-year contract with some tool that was wrong at the time they bought it in the first place. These are all constraints that you're stuck with, right? I'm going to tell you right now, if you're trying to keep APTs out, right, you are probably missing the majority, right, of obvious attacks. I work with companies every week, work with organizations every week that are prioritizing nation-state threats. They're just following the latest CTI, and they're like, we too will stop Midnight Blizzard. And I'm like, Microsoft didn't stop Midnight Blizzard, brother. You don't have a chance, right? They had more people review, Microsoft had more people review the Midnight Blizzard blog than you have FTEs in security. Put that in perspective, right? So what are you trying to stop, right? You're trying to stop the most, again, as we move down that budget space and down that FTE space, right? We're really trying to keep out the most obvious of attacks, right? And the ones that we can't stop, we want to be in a position to recover from, well, detect early, right, and then recover from. I'm not about to go on the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt train here and be like, according to the Mandiant M-Trends report, the shorter your dwell time, the better off you'll have for recovery. But there's a reality to that. If you work incident response, you know that the faster you catch a threat actor getting into your network, the less the damage is. the more complete your logs are, the better you can investigate it, the easier you can defend your position to regulators, right? Auditors, regulators, whatever the case may be. The reality is, though, we have a lot of technical debt. I built this slide before before a large bridge collapsed, right? So, just so you know, from a timing perspective, right? This probably looks in poor taste now as I'm looking at it. But anywho, I want to talk quickly about best practices, because this is another one that I keep bumping up against, where I'll go to an organization and they'll say, well, Jake, best practice says that we deploy, and I'm not going to mention a vendor here, right, but that we deploy this multi-million-dollar PAM solution. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Your revenue last year was $300 million, right? You're going to spend $1.5 million on a PAM solution? Not your budget's $300 million, your revenue, right? So that may be best practice for a mega SaaS corporation, right? But you're not that, right? Best practices are always situational, right? And I ask you to keep that in mind as folks are telling you, you must do X, right? This is a best practice. It's always situational. I want to talk quickly about build or buy. This is something near and dear to my heart. I've built a lot of stuff over the years. I'm not about to be one of those folks that's like, hey, you have to know how to program to succeed in cybersecurity. Although I'll tell you, when you learn to script and you learn to program, it opens up doors in cybersecurity that aren't available otherwise. So I'm a big proponent of build, right? The geek in me wants to go build. I'm going to throw out here that build is almost always necessary for some orgs at some level, right? But you have to be really, really thoughtful about this, because everything you choose to do, you are actively choosing not to do something else. There are a finite number of hours in a year. It's 2,080 hours in the year, or 2,080 work hours, in the year. But of course, you're going to take vacation, you're going to have sick days, you're going to come to conferences like RSA, where you're not going to be implementing tech solutions, and so will your employees. I hope you're sending them to conferences like RSA, right, or other conferences so they can learn, right, because otherwise, yikes, right, that sounds like a bad thing. So we really have to step back and ask, not, will this thing we're choosing to do help for security? The question you're really asking is this thing the best use of my resources right now, my limited resources, right now, that will maximize my security? CISOs that miss the difference between those questions fail consistently. Fail consistently. If you take one thing away from the talk, that's it, right? It's make sure that you differentiate between this is good for security and this is the best thing I can do for my security program right now, given my limited resources. Because there's a lot of shiny objects out there to buy, right? And then a lot of times folks come back and say, well, look at this open source thing. It works just the same. We get the same value out of this, right? Maybe, right? Maybe. But the reality is it's probably going to take longer to deploy the open source solution. Then you have a whole support trail, right? You always can call vendor support. Oh, wait, no. And then a vulnerability comes out, and that definitely gets rolled in. No, that doesn't happen either. Okay, so open source does have a lot of costs as well, right? And again, I'm not an anti-open source guy either. It's just a matter of selecting the right security stack, right, for your situation. The biggest thing that I talk to folks about, though, in the build versus buy discussion is maintenance. And I want to talk about maintenance a little bit, specifically from the idea of a small medium business or small medium enterprise. I'm talking about the folks who have single-digit security teams, right? So single-digit headcount for your security teams, right? Just quick math here, and I promise this will be the most math we do, right, in the whole presentation. But when you have single-digit security teams and you lose one person, you are losing more than 10% of your capacity, right? By the way, too, right, you probably have fewer backfills around or redundancy, right, in that security team, right? And so when you lose that person, right, it matters phenomenally more. And I have seen entire security programs crumble over the loss of a key person when they build up around open source. Right? I want to be very clear about that. Open source sounds like a great idea. By the way, too, I use it all the time. I'm going to come back to a couple of open source solutions. I deploy these through Hunter Strategy, right? 100%, right? There are great ways to do this. But there's a cost, right? Because when you are particularly a small security team and let's say that you deploy a commercial product instead and you lose the one person that knew that, you roll right out to your MSP and say, hey, give me a insert whatever vendor product name here, SME, right? And you can immediately buy your way out of that problem right now. When you've customized a bunch of open source stuff, because it's never just the right out of the box open source, we've done a bunch of customization, what have you, on it, inevitably, you can't roll right out to that IT MSP and say, send me an SME. I'll be like, well, I can send you an SME that knows some Linux, right? And it's like, well, that's not what I asked for, right? That's not going to get me across that hump. Right? Now, again, if you have big teams, you've got a lot of redundancy here, rock on, right? But be aware, be very, very cognizant, right, of that hidden cost of employee turnover, because it is exponentially larger. The impact is exponentially larger in smaller teams. So when I was putting this presentation together last year, I tweeted out basically asking for some consultants to give me the worst advice that they'd ever heard given to small, medium enterprises. And man, did folks not disappoint, right? And so Mick, I love this one here, right? So just set up some Audit D, right? Okay, by the way, I'm gonna throw out here, I use the heck out of Audit Daemon, right? But there is no just, right? I wanna be super clear. Anybody comes to you in any complex cybersecurity problem and says, just do X, they foundationally misunderstand the difficulty of doing that thing. Just is a danger word for me, right? Or they're trying to sell you something, right? It'll be just that easy, right? There's no just with Audit Daemon, right? So what else? Just disable, and there's that just word again. Just disable NTLM authentication. By the way, real quick here, side note, right? And this is good for everyone in the room. If your domain controllers will still accept NTLM v1, I can buy my way to domain admin. If you don't know for a fact that every one of your domain controllers will not accept, I didn't say defaults to NTLM v2, I mean if it will accept an NTLM v1 connection, I can buy my way to domain admin. I'm a few $1,000s in cloud compute away. NTLM v1 is secured with DES under the hood. Notice I didn't say triple DES, I said DES, 56-bit DES. And this was probably a great idea 25 years ago. And it is not today. Now, I recognize that we have lots of legacy devices. Notice I didn't say just go disable NTLM v1, right? We have lots of legacy devices that require it. I see it in practically every organization that I'm in, manufacturing, healthcare, utilities, you name it, right? This is a hard problem, right? My answer there, by the way, is stand up a separate domain, right, for those devices only, right, if they need to be domain joined, right? And what you're doing is you are basically amputating that gangrened leg, right? I hate to say it that way, but that's the reality of the situation, right? Segment that stuff away, right? Because, and then by all means, let the threat actor, I mean, you can't stop it. Let the threat actor buy their way to domain admin in your legacy network, right? Again, best bad plan as it turns out, but at least the rest of my network is there. I love too, just disable Office macros domain wide. Tell me you've never worked in an enterprise without telling me you've never worked in an enterprise, right? Anyway, this is read the stuff out of a book kind of stuff, right? Zero trust like Google. I love that one, right? What the heck is zero trust in the first place? I'm in a room full of incredibly smart people. And if I asked even just the front row here to give me their definition of zero trust, right, I'd get 12 different answers across the front row, and there's 12 different people, right? But of course, we'll just do zero trust like Google, because don't worry, we have Google resources, right? Sure, that'll work. Deploy network access control. I love this. This is another one we've never been there before, right? Just deploy network access control. And again, this is not a bad idea in some environments. It's not a great idea for small, medium enterprises, right? You have to be this tall to ride the internet if you're doing NAC, and that is minimum, I think, probably 10,000 employees, unless you're in a very, very specialized situation, which I'm happy to talk about. I love this, world-wide permissions. That's hilarious, right? And so, again, this is a great way to go break stuff. I like to call these resume updating events, right? And so implement application whitelisting, allow listing or application control. I know that term's fallen out of vogue. Any of you ever tried this in an environment, strict application control in your environment? Yeah, I was gonna ask, did you move jobs shortly afterwards, or, right? This is hard, right? I mean, it's easier in a server environment where things don't change a lot, right? But it's not something that's globally usable, right? So yeah, I love this one. Even just patch can be difficult for an SMB. And brother, it's more than just SMBs, right? It's more than just SMEs, right? It's all the way up and down the Fortune 500. It's everybody. Nobody has an easy just patch, right? Okay, so look, I think it's clear, again, who are the have-nots, right? And obviously there are really bad advice. There's a lot of really bad advice being given to actually companies of all sizes, but particularly smaller organizations. I want to jump into some best practices, security best practices for our have-nots. But listen, before I start that, right, your threat model is your threat model. It's nobody else's threat model, right? If these recommendations aren't for you, that's fine, right? They aren't for you, period, right? I have folks that'll come back after I do a lot of these talks in different venues, and I'll have folks come up afterwards and like, man, Jake, let me tell you about why your talk sucked, right? And I'm like, don't care. Right? Oh no, actually, I do care very much. Please fill out the RSA feedback surveys afterwards, right? What I mean by I don't care is like they'll come up and they'll say, let me tell you about my super specific situation that applies to exactly one organization on the planet, and that's why your advice doesn't fit in that particular space. And I'm like, rock on, I'm not talking to you, right? I mean, I will come talk to you. We'll develop a security program that works for you, but we're talking general here, right? So again, if this is not your threat model, right? If your threat model truly is, you need to keep the nation states out, right? First off, you already lost. I'm saying that as a former nation state hacker. But secondarily, again, that's not the majority of us, right? So I want to talk quickly about where we prioritize, because remember, everything we choose to do, we actively are choosing not to do something else. And so ideally, I would like perfect prevention. I would like to prevent all attacks, and I would like to have perfect logging data of all those attacks. I'd like to have it all, right? But I can't have my cake and eat it too. And so from the outset, I have to step back and ask, am I most concerned? Notice I didn't say not concerned. Am I most concerned about having investigative data or preventing an attack? Now, when I talk to CISOs about this, usually they gut react and they're like, obviously preventing an attack, right? And I'm going to tell you that my experience over multiple decades in cybersecurity, sitting on both sides of the keyboard, right? Defending, investigating, certainly, hacking, right? Not red teaming, right? Applied red teaming. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that a 30-foot wall, right, creates a market for 32-foot ladders. And if you are already in a budget-constrained and a resource-constrained environment, you've lost, right? I'm not trying to be the bearer of bad news. It's just reality. We're not going to stop several of those attacks, right? But with the right telemetry in place, we can detect those attacks and respond to them, right? And then, as we respond to them, we will have the data available to show to our auditors, to show to our regulators, right? Indeed, that we either did or did not have data exfiltration. If we did, hopefully, what was it, right? And be very, very specific about it. Secondarily, right, I am not a feelings guy, right? I don't like to go budget on feelings. I like to budget using data, right? Data greater than feelings. That data that I'm collecting today in my resource-constrained environment is going to help me prioritize the right security tools that I'm going to buy tomorrow and the next day as I start getting budget. If I have the ability to go back and brief the board, right, I can use the data that I have, right, because let me tell you, boards love cybersecurity data. When you give them meaningful metrics, if you show them how many port scans are firewall blocked, I promise you they will zone out, right? I was doing some board engagement a couple of years ago, and I remember this one board member actually fishing up in Alaska. By the way, if you ever get a chance to go to board engagement, that's the ticket, right? Fishing up in Alaska, and the guy's like, Jake, you know what the problem is with all these CISOs? I'm like, I can name plenty, right? And he's like, well, let me tell you what I think. I'm like, yeah, good idea there. He's like, remember the Charlie Brown Christmas special? I'm like, yeah, I do, right? And he's like, they all sound like that. He's like, wah, 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 wah. Money for security, wah, 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 right? If you're a CISO or a cybersecurity director, my friends, your job, right, your mission, right, is to go and give them data, right, and contextualize it in a way that they can understand. Because no CISO ever, right, has gone to a board. How many folks in here actually, before I say this, how many folks in here are CISOs or have been a CISO in the past? Okay. Keep your hands up. No, go keep your hands up. Now, keep your hands up if you've ever gone to the board and not asked for budget. Okay, yeah, I see one or two or three, right? You kind of see and I'm doing this for not to kind of laugh a little bit about this, right? But for the folks who haven't done this before, because I know we've got a lot of folks here that are aspiring into security leadership positions. And what you see here is the vast majority of folks are like, yeah, our programs are underfunded, right? We need additional controls. We recognize gaps, right? And you're asking for additional budget. And I'm telling you, based on the board engagement that I do, in the vast majority of cases, right, the board is not hearing you, right? And so when you come with data, right, and then you contextualize it using words they can understand, right, that's when you get budget. Ira Winkler had a fantastic presentation on this Monday afternoon. I hope that one was recorded. I don't know. Anyway, so, this is fun. All right, let's talk about event logs. In the year of our Lord 2024, there is no reason that event logs should have a default 20 megabyte size. Should not. That's ridiculous. My smartwatch has more space for logs. This is not a joke. My Garmin smartwatch has more space for logs than your default install of Server 2019. Think about that. Let that sink in for just a second. And if you haven't configured it, right? By the way, this is free. You just go in and do it. I use the word just. You go in and you do it with GPO, right? This is an easy thing to do. Disk space is practically free. Increase the size of every log on every system using GPO. Fun story, by the way. I've been doing a lot of work in AI for, sadly, a lot of years, right? First experience of that was Institute for Defense Analysis back in 2008. And, man, lots of folks are worried about like AI taking their jobs, and I am not, because a few years ago, I had this company contact me. They're a big marketing company. I do some influencer work occasionally for different cybersecurity vendors, right? And so it's not odd that somebody's reaching out to me to do some influencer work. They want to do some influencer work for a chainsaw company. I'm like, do you have the right person? Like, and I'm lost, right? They're showing me chainsaws and tools that I actually don't know what they do, but they look like axe kind of stuff and picks and poles and whatever. I'm like, this, you clearly have a mismatch here. And then you're like, no, we don't, right? Our advanced marketing firm, right, that uses a bunch of machine learning and whatnot, they're like, you have the top engagement in social media on log management. And I'm like, well, okay, rock on, but you have the wrong kind of logs, my friend, right? So I wish I could help you, right? Different kind of logs to keep me in mind down the road, right? I mean, I'll play a lumberjack on TV, right? I didn't sleep at Holiday Inn Express or anything, but look, Sysmon's fantastic as well, right? But you got to know what you're getting into there. I should note there, got to know what you're getting into, right? I work with organizations at least once a quarter who go and just deploy Sysmon to a bunch of, we'll call them end-of-life PCs that were probably underpowered the day they were purchased, and Sysmon cripples them, because it does, right? It will if you have a config unchecked. Right, but a great place to start is Swift on Security config. If you're not familiar with that, Google it. It's an easy one to download. A lot of folks too mention they're like, but if you can expand the logs, but if you, what happens if the threat actor deletes the logs? Well, I'm here to tell you, when they delete the logs, they don't really delete the logs. Right? A Windows event log is a circular log file, and it just updates the pointer. Right? So all your forensics tools, right, can still read all the logs until they get overwritten again. But that won't happen because you've increased the size of your logs above 20 megabytes. Right? Oh, okay, I should mention here, by the way, that all of my AI-generated art has hilarious mistakes in it, right? So before somebody's like, he didn't notice the third arm, oh brother, did I, right? So I absolutely did, right? So this is kind of from here on out, becomes a little bit of a scavenger hunt, right? For the fun in the, the fun in the art. But let's talk about print monitoring, right? This is something you can do for free. It's built into Windows. I am blown away at how few organizations know you can do this. You can turn on print monitoring and get a full log. By the way, then you can forward those logs someplace. You could even, I don't know, write alerting rules around those logs if somebody printed out too many pages or, to an unapproved printer. Not that that should happen, but anyway, you get a log of who printed the job, the file name, the printer it went to, the number of pages printed, and it catches print to PDF. I mean, this is solid gold right here, right? Now, it's not DLP. You should not confuse this for DLP. DLP is definitely better at this one thing. That's probably all it's good at, but DLP is definitely better, right, at identifying, don't allow somebody to print something, right, that has particular keywords in it, right? By the way, too, a highly sophisticated threat actor, right, could rename the file, right, and print it, right, in which case you would not know what was actually printed, right? Okay, fine, right? Remember, we're not going for perfect. We're going for better, right? So this is for free. You can go do this. And then you do not have to pay a fortune to buy additional modules for your EDR so that you can control USBs. Windows has been doing this, as it turns out, for several versions, right? All it takes is GPO. And you can even say if you have a use case that requires, as it turns out, 1 or 2 users to be able to write to USB and everybody else, right, to be able, or some other set of folks to be able to read from USB, right? Okay, rock on. You can still disable execute from USB, which sounds like a really good idea, right? Really good idea. I run into law firms, I'll work with a bunch of law firms, both in security and doing expert witness work. And they'll be like, oh, Jake, no, man, our lawyers, we can't do the USB control thing because our lawyers, they need to be able to take files from clients. And I'm like, cool, that doesn't involve writing, does it? And they're like, well, you know, it's taking the files the clients bring on USB. I'm like, right, excuse me, not to overload the word right, correct. Right? That's a read operation. They're like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, so why are they allowed to write and execute from USB? And they're like, well, because we don't have a DLP solution. And I'm like, Windows does this, right? So, okay, moving forward, right? Let's talk about our low budget security stack, right? So a couple of recommendations before we'll get into how do you go build that low budget security stack, right? First and foremost, right, I am not going to call out any vendors. You will note I have been very, very, very careful not to mention any vendors thus far, right? So if you are from a vendor, I promised RSA that I wouldn't dog any particular vendors, right? So that's good, right? But I am going to say here, if your solution requires 40 hours of training so that your org can be certified and get support for the product, you are not appropriate for small, medium enterprises, period. In fact, you're probably not appropriate for a lot of other organizations, but that is a different talk for a different time. Catch me at the bar. We'll talk over a cold adult beverage, right? So first off, EDR is table stakes. That's it, right? Go buy an EDR agent you can afford. If you don't have an EDR agent, you work in small, medium enterprise, and you don't have, I see some folks laughing. That's a bad sign. If you don't have an EDR agent, right, please go deploy an EDR agent. Go deploy an EDR agent, any EDR agent, right? I happen to like for small, medium enterprises, yeah, you know what? I'm actually going to talk nice about a vendor. I like Sophos, right? Now, I want to be very clear. I hate threat hunting in Sophos. I hate it, right? I'd rather have bamboo shoots shoved up under my fingernails. But it is a great, easy to use, very, very, very capable, right? Very capable EDR, and it's cheap, and it's easy to deploy, right? As easy as any EDR is to deploy, right? So, or pick another one. I actually don't care. All these vendors out here, right? Remember the MITRE ATT&CK scorecard last year, right? Remember everybody scoring 100%? No, really, everybody scored 100%, right? And so, rock on. Look, there's not a useful differentiation here, right? I mean, there are useful differentiations, but in the space we're talking about, no, right? Email. Exchange on-prem is indefensible, right? This is the one vendor piece I'm going to talk negatively about, and it's Microsoft. I love Microsoft. They do amazing work. Microsoft security folks, I love you, seriously. I can't do it. There we go, the little heart, right? Love you folks, right? You do fantastic work. I know some product manager here is killing Exchange on-prem. Rock on, right? I know you want to fix it, and you can't. Now, for everybody else, Exchange on-prem is indefensible. Get the heck off of it. This is not just a first-party concern. I want to be clear about this because a lot of small, medium enterprises are doing business down market, even further down market than they are, right? And as they're doing that business down market, they're doing it with a lot of folks who don't know this and aren't sending people here and who think Exchange on-prem is just like Microsoft 365, except we control all of it, right? It's indefensible, right? Just want to be super clear about that, right? So if you are still running Exchange, call, or a third party that you work with is still running Exchange, call an IT managed service provider and have them do this today. Right? I said before, if you only take one thing away, make it the other thing, and I don't remember what that was, but this is now it, right? If you only take one thing away today, if this is you, right, this is the thing you should take away. Don't do it yourself. That's one of the dumbest things you can do. I run into, this is an all the time thing, right, where, I'll be doing an incident or working an incident, and one of the security managers is like, yeah, we did that transition ourselves. We were really low on budget, right? Of course, we're talking about the transition, right, from Exchange to Microsoft 365 because it was material in the incident and the way they configured it or lack thereof. And they're like, yeah, we didn't call a managed service provider because, we're really tight on budget. And I'm like, how's that working out for you, right? Because it doesn't work well, right? Look, IT managed service provider is not good for a lot of stuff, right? The stuff they do every day, day in, day out, right? They're Microsoft certified partners, right? This is stuff they're really good for. You should use them, right? Oh, by the way, too, if indeed they screw the configuration up, you at least have a finger to point, right? There's at least a neck to go choke somewhere. But the bottom line here is the cost of getting this wrong is phenomenal, right? Also, you have limited time, right? Your time is better, I promise you, your time is better spent elsewhere on stuff the IT MSP can't help you with. File shares. Do not host file shares locally. I talk to businesses all the time, where they're like, Jake, do you know the cost per gigabyte in the cloud? I'm like, yes, I do. I absolutely do, right? They're like, yeah, see, I went and I bought this NAS unit, right, or network attached storage unit, and I'm like, cool, you literally bought that as it was going end of life, right, but cool. And they're like, well, the price per terabyte, right, and look at how cheap it is. And I'm like, well, brother, it's cheap for a reason, right? Well, cheap for lots of reasons, right? But look, be real about this. Your online file storage, right, you can, I'm not going to say trivially recover from ransomware because there's no such thing. I've been involved now more than 100 ransomware investigations in various capacities, and there is no trivial recovery, my friends. But when your data survives, it's a completely different game. Recovery is a completely different game. You can put people to work immediately, right? If they're pulling from OneDrive and SharePoint, you can literally roll out to Best Buy with a corporate credit card, and you can buy a brand new, this has happened in a lot of cases, you can go buy a couple of brand new laptops, and you can have your critical staff back up and running, connected to your Microsoft 365 environment with online file shares. So, are you paying more for those online file for that online file storage? Yes, you are, right? But there's a reason for it, right? You've got version control, you've got backups. This is stuff you now don't have to think about. Now, before somebody says, what happens when Microsoft 365 goes down? Folks, lock and load, right? It's pandemonium, right? I mean, if Microsoft 365 goes down and never recovers, right? Like, we will have riots in the streets. Be real, right? This is when an auditor comes to me and they're like, what's your plan for when the AWS East 1 goes down? I'm like, first off, I'm not in East 1 because it's always East 1. East 1 is always where stuff happens, right? So first off, don't be in East 1. But, right, well, okay, you're in East 2. What happens when US East 2 goes down? I'm like, well, look, I've got multi-region replication. Like, what happens when multiple regions go down simultaneously? I'm like, the purge, right? And so, so as we get into the Microsoft 365 side, right, and again, if you like Google Workspace, fine, go to Google Workspace. They are a fine competitor, particularly at small, medium enterprise levels, right? But the bottom line here is use that online file storage, right? It only looks expensive until you look at all of the stuff that you have to do otherwise. As far as the offline backups, again, like if you're a Fortune 100 with money to burn, yeah, by all means, back up all of that data outside of Microsoft 365. Buy a Veeam solution or whatever, right? Download all that data, store it someplace else. But remember, that's not who we're talking to here. Right? We're talking to small, medium enterprises, limited budget. You should not be prioritizing offline backup of your SaaS data there. It's just, I mean, now look, down market SaaS, some fly-by-night started yesterday, sure. Microsoft, Google, absolutely not, right? That's just not in your threat model. Okay, let's talk about DNS, right? So DNS over HTTP and DNS over TLS, these are fantastic if you live in an authoritarian country and you don't want your government to be able to see what you are looking up over DNS. It's a fantastic thing. And for enterprises, it's a horrible thing. Use enterprise browser management and disable it. By the way, right, Windows now offers the option where everything in DNS, right, can be ultimately, or all your DNS, right, not just the browser, can be sent over HTTPS or TLS. And so you want to make sure and go disable the setting because you want visibility. Now, there is an exception to this. I want to be super clear. Microsoft just announced Zero Trust DNS, right, which I am a tremendous fan of, but will require way more configuration than small, medium enterprises are going to be able to handle, right? So in that case, yes, if you're using Microsoft Zero Trust DNS, which is not public beta yet, right, but as you roll into that, since I know it's out, right, by all means, right, but again, that's not who we're talking to here, right? Let's talk about network security monitoring. Your firewall logs are not sufficient for incident investigations, right? Consistently, I work with organizations at time of breach or time of incident, and they're like, Jake, we have firewall logs. And then we find out they've got about 3 hours of firewall logs, and it's only NetFlow, right? If that. Sometimes it's only what got blocked at the firewall, right? Well, that's not helpful. I mean, I guess it's minimally helpful sometimes, but not really. I am a big, big fan of SecurityOnion, right? So a couple of reasons I like SecurityOnion. One, it's open source and free. I like free. Second is, right, the second one is that Mr. Doug Burks, right, who invented, actually I know Doug from before SecurityOnion. I know Doug when he was working as a security analyst at the Augusta Chronicle. We call it the Augusta Comical because it reads like it was written in Crayola. No offense to Doug, he didn't write any of the articles. But he ultimately built SecurityOnion, and it's now a company, right? These folks not only build this fantastic Linux distribution, right, that, I mean, there's tons of customization you can do on it, but you don't need to, right, out of the box. It will just, there's that word again, it will collect lots of data for you, lots of networking data for you. It's a fantastic tool. And they offer training and support. The training's cheap, right, and they have commercial support available. Remember the whole buy your way out of open source problems? You usually can't do that. This is an exception. And it's one of the reasons I recommend it as an exception, right? Ooh, network taps, right? So there are some fantastic network tap vendors out there. Keysight/Ixia, man, the Gigamons of the world, right? And they are fantastic and oftentimes come with 6-figure price tags. And so when I start talking NSM to folks, right, they're like, man, my switches are old, I can't do span ports, right, or I don't have the throughput to do span ports and whatnot. My friends, Dualcomm has you covered, right? I have been using Dualcomm taps now for a decade. I have had zero failures, right? Zero failures in production, right? Just has never happened. We got one that was DOA, right? One of, seriously now, probably 300 or 400 of these things we've deployed, right? And they're dirt cheap. Not these specifically, right? They were gigabit taps that it was deploying 10 years ago. But gigabit taps are on $200, 10 gig taps, $700. You do not have an excuse. There's never now the excuse to say, well, we can't afford a tap, right? If you can't afford a tap, you probably can't afford to stay in business is really where we're at this point, right? And your SecurityOnion server does not have to be way over spec. You can go grab a lifecycle replacement server, right? So something you were already cycling out and make the old server SecurityOnion. I know you can do this because that's how Doug started it, right? He took an old server that they had just decommissioned, right, at the Augusta Chronicle and built SecurityOnion. And then they found great stuff with it, and then very quickly Mandiant scooped him up, and he worked there for a few years, and then spun off to be his own company. SIEM, right? Oh, hey, what are the odds? SecurityOnion has a SIEM as well, right? So it already has a pre-built ELK stack, right? It's feeding network data, but as it turns out, ELK, right, Elastic, Logstash, and Kibana, with a Logstash client, and there are, turns out, not only documentation, but also training available, right, for how to configure this. You can just forward your logs to SecurityOnion. And now you have, and again, it's not the best SIEM in the world, right? You will have to write lots of rules around it, but it is a SIEM, right? By the way, remember the whole EDR agent thing. If you don't have an EDR agent, Waza, right? Waza is a free EDR, open source EDR agent, right, that you can use to collect telemetry. This is fantastic. Now, remember I said before there's no major difference between EDRs. I meant to say commercial EDRs, right? I would not want to go sit in front of my auditor in a regulated data environment and be like, yeah, so we saved $3 million last year by switching from vendor to Waza, right? I would not want to defend that position. But if I didn't have an EDR at all, I would install Waza in a heartbeat, and I have in a lot of environments. I do a good deal of work in industrial control systems, right? And a lot of those environments, sadly not as many as should be, are not as many as should be, are offline, right? They're disconnected from the internet. And the vast majority of our EDRs today are SaaS products. That doesn't work in an offline environment, and that's where Waza is my friend, right? Waza is my best bad plan. Have you ever seen Argo? Love the movie Argo. Argo has the best cybersecurity analogy or best cybersecurity lesson I think that you can get, period. When the gentleman there is going and briefing, by the way, if you haven't seen Argo, you owe it to yourself. I think it's on Netflix right now, or it's one of the major streaming vendors. But they go brief the plan to the State Department. CIA is briefing this plan about extracting a bunch of hostages from Iran. It's actually based on a true story. They're briefing and they're like, we're going to go make a movie, right? And we're going to pretend that these hostages, right? These people that are squirreled away in an ambassador's house, we're going to pretend that they're part of the movie crew. So one agent goes in alone, right? CIA officer, actually, I shouldn't say agent. CIA officer goes in alone and then comes back out with the rest of his movie crew that allegedly they came in with. This is an audacious plan. As they're briefing the State Department, right, the Secretary of State says, "That's a horrible plan." And without missing a beat, the CIA supervisor says, "Sir, this is the best bad plan we have." I love that. Because every day in security, I go into work, and I know what the best plan is. Go ahead and ask me how many times I execute the best plan. I can't remember. I seriously can't remember. Every day, I'm executing the best bad plan given the circumstances. Right? And so this, right, in Waza, right, in an online environment, is maybe your best bad plan given the circumstances. Rock on. Password managers, Bitwarden, I love it, right? It's free, it's open source. Yes, you can get commercial services around it. Again, you'll notice there's kind of a theme here, right? Waza, by the way, has commercial services as well. You will be doing yourself a tremendous favor by, as it turns out, if you're going to implement open source as a small business or a smaller organization, get stuff that has commercial support available. Because then when you lose that key employee, you can buy your way out of that problem. Patching, this is ridiculously difficult. This is a buy. This is a buy. There is no open source here that actually works. This is a buy, right? Automox, PDQ, right? I'll tell you, Automox is one of my secret weapons, right? It's one of my secret weapons. It fixes patching on my clients, right? Even in remote work, distributed environments, I don't have to give people admin. A monkey can install it, drunk, right? It's easy, right? There's just no good open source solutions for this. Because be real, the majority of the problems with you patching is you actually rolling the installer into an MSI, right? It's building the patch, right? Automox and PDQ, they take care of this for you. It's not distributing it. That's easy, right? Building it. What's that? Winget, right? For some things, right? Winget doesn't give me enough client side. For Microsoft stuff, I have a lot of stuff, but for third-party apps, that Winget's not. I don't have enough in Winget, right? So, CSPM. Let's talk about this. CloudSploit, fully functional open source CSPM. It's low lift to get up. I love this, right? If you're looking for a CSPM but you don't have one, right? CloudSploit is a very capable option for free. Seriously, and I'm not going to name any vendors here, it's better than some of the vendors on the market. You can't do better than Wiz. I want to be super clear about that, right? You can't do better than Wiz, but you'll also pay for Wiz, right? A lot for Wiz. But anyway, I'm going to say something profoundly unpopular, and that's that many businesses shouldn't be in the cloud. Now look, you want to do cloud file storage. I want to be clear here. What I'm talking about when I say shouldn't be in the cloud, this is platform as a service, this is infrastructure as a service, right? Not SaaS, right? Not Microsoft 365, Google Workspace. Use one of those, please. A lot of small, medium businesses, small, medium enterprises should not be in the cloud. There are a lot of hidden costs in the cloud, right? It complicates security to an unacceptable level when you have an underfunded team. Because suddenly your IT team, remember, they're probably also underfunded, have to understand how to secure things both on-prem and in the cloud. And the stuff that works on-prem and is good secured, remember best practices are situational. Some of the stuff that works really well on-prem, as I go lift and shift that to the cloud, it's vulnerable, right? That's bad, right? Now I'm stretching my security team even thinner, right? So I want to throw out here that you can achieve far better security by redirecting resources to securing your less complex deployments, right? Do those on-prem, right? Or or put them in a colo someplace. Lots of managed service providers do manage virtual machines, right? Again, they can help you secure those. Again, most small, medium enterprises are not ready for Azure. They're not ready for AWS. They're not ready for GCP. I know because I work the incidents. Right? Backups. Look, you can go talk to any number of vendors in the vendor hall about air-gap backups and recovery environments. And folks, even in the biggest organizations, I've never done a full ransomware recovery in a recovery environment, the offline, air-gapped recovery environments, because it takes a phenomenal amount of work. And as the days drag on, one of the questions comes up is, how can we speed this up? And the answer is, start restoring to prod, right? And the business wins, right? And so if you want to start talking about easy ways to do offline backups, I will tell you what I did at my last consultancy. I went and bought 3 network-attached storage units, right? Now, they weren't my file shares, right? But for stuff we had on-prem, our VM deployments specifically, that we had on-prem, we had 2 in the office at any given time, one of them physically removed. Well, 2 at any given time. 1 at any given time online, and at least 1 off-site in a fire-resistant safe, right? And so Unit C comes back in, right? Well, technically Unit B leaves, Unit C comes back in, right? And then syncs back to the online copy. That's it. That's cheap. It's also manual. It's also a pain in the butt, right? But it's something everybody in the room can do. And they don't have to be NAS units. They literally can be, little external hard drives if that's all you can afford, right? But there's no reason not to have offline backups, right? So, SaaS. Use SaaS wherever you can. This is another thing that I have to go fight with SMEs about. Look, just because you can implement something on-prem doesn't mean you should, right? SaaS takes care of a lot of the security for you, right? Now, again, a lot of the times I run into folks who are like, well, the SaaS provider doesn't have all the features that this offline solution does, right? Great example of this was, Jira, right? How's that working out for everybody? Jira and Confluence on-prem, right? Anyway, and so, again, by the way, I love Jira. Atlassian does a fantastic job with Jira and Confluence. Jira is my favorite ITSM, hands down, right? But I don't want to run it on-prem, right? You should be running in SaaS, right? Because you're not having to deal with the vulnerability management, right? Yes, you pay a monthly fee for it. Yes, it's cheaper to buy one site license one time and never update it, right? But that comes with lots of other issues, right? So anyway, let's talk about off-limit solutions as we close up, right? Here's lots of stuff you shouldn't pursue, right? If you don't have a lot of budget. But I want to start here and close with managed threat hunting. That is, and I know I'm going to annoy some vendors here, but I'm just going to tell you that in the vast majority of cases, now, if you bring in a boutique, right, to come threat hunt for you, right, by all means, this is not the experience I'm talking about. But if you are going with big name vendor who also has an EDR product and you are paying for managed threat hunting, you are paying, right, you are effectively paying for somebody to front run their own detections, right, to front run their own detections. So you are getting a detection potentially marginally quicker. I can also tell you that I work with enough of these vendors that a lot of their managed threat hunting services don't really have analysts behind them. You're not getting the service you think. I worked with one major one. They're here at the conference with a full city block size booth, it feels like, right? And they had a 40 customers per analyst on their managed threat hunt team, right? Think about that for a second, right? Because you definitely aren't getting the service that you thought you were if your analyst has 40 customers that they are threat hunting in the environment, right? Anyway, not appropriate for small, medium enterprises. So I got to wrap up here. RSA wants me to have an apply slide, right? So next week, go do a gap assessment. Start there, right? Walk through the slides. I saw a lot of people taking pictures. You can download these from the RSA site, and they recorded this talk, right? Go do the gap assessment. In the first 3 months, discuss with your management where you have recommendations that you might be able to work in and begin thinking about implementation plans. And then work with your procurement teams, right? And start finding people in your supplier ecosystem because, folks, it's not just you. It's your suppliers, too. It's everybody you connect to. With that, thank you so much for coming out. Appreciate your time. Have a great RSA.